cover of George Orwell's 1984 becomes less censored with wear. And yeah, it does do that. It has, yeah, you can clearly see 1984 written out on the cover. I didn't know that. I've never read the book. I don't have it. But, that's very interesting. It probably, feeds into the themes. I would probably know that more if I, read it, but you know what, maybe I should read it. It seems like a pretty good book. Everyone talks about it all the time, and it's
A unite, a stage, a coup, a revolution, a bring, a genocide, a new world, In the MK Ultra experiments, the CIA dosed unwitting subjects with LSD to see how they would react. What has not yet come to light is that MK Ultra was an intra-agency project. The CIA created new departments within the CIA and fed them steady doses of LSD and other psychoactives to see how the departments would diverge and mutate away from normal departments. Whole projects and hierarchies were created with everybody involved being more or less unwittingly under the influence of LSD. This is how the restraint bed portals and flesh interfaces were first created. In other words, from a heavily psycho-mutated hierarchy. The entire thing had to be eliminated, but the technology that it created has been revolutionary.
Tifu by accidentally making napalm in my friend's garage. You see, when given a lighter combustible material, a lighter, and boredom, what do you expect me to do? Well, spray paint burns, and styrofoam does too. I'm not sure what ticked in my mind, but I decided to spray paint this huge block of styrofoam and set it alight to see what happens, being the man-child I am. For those you who do not know, the material used to make styrofoam when combined with oil is essentially making napalm, unbeknownst to me. It caught on fire very quickly, but didn't seem like anything too serious until several seconds. In less than a minute, this flaming block of styrofoam from hell is not only blazing out of control, but completely fills the garage with black smoke.
In Vietnam, the U.S. government tried to pacify the country village by village using the Strategic Hamlet program, basically creating villages where there was no or little Viet Cong influence. They tried more extreme experiments where they completely isolated villages or groups of villages, allowing absolutely nobody to enter or exit for periods of up to 4 years. In some of the villages, people simply starved to death. In other, more self-sufficient villages, the people managed to scrape by. It was noted that in many of the villages where this technique was tried, messianic or millenarian movements sprang up. In 16 separate incidences, villages were able to independently invent flesh interfaces and non-electrical portals, and it was surmised that these villages were being collectively dosed with LSD for long periods of time, and their intellectual mutations allowed for these advances. The flesh interfaces were eventually destroyed by the North Vietnamese army at a terrible cost in lives.
Today I learned Winston Churchill, along with many of the Royal Navy's highest-ranking men, came very close to death after the ship they were on was fired at by...
I'm surprised they used nuclear subs in the Falklands, considering the battle's proximity to the undersea incident zone surrounding the so-called Artigas portal. As I understand it, the portal was opened because of experiments taking place in the CIA's Antarctic station in the early 80s, and the Falklands quickly became a center for portal research. Being underwater, the portal had an enormous incident zone, and segmented whales and other undersea debris would regularly wash up on the island's shores. They found one whale that had been segmented cleanly in half by an incident zone disturbance, providing a perfect cross-section of the creature. They also found hundreds of the chitinous cruciform creatures, certainly non-terrestrial in origin. Anyways, if a nuclear sub had wandered into the incident zone, it could have been disastrous, but I guess they considered the risk acceptable. The Soviets designated large portions of the Ukraine countryside as harvest populations, Basically, their food and water supplies were dosed with LSD until they had achieved what the Soviets called integration. This meant that the local populations had independently invented flesh interfaces. The Soviet army would then quarantine the area and try to remove the flesh interfaces for their own use. This was usually without success and with great loss of life. Many of the soldiers and scientists were segmented, as often happens in an incident zone. So they ended up with people missing limbs, cut in half, etc. What's interesting is that the people could live for quite some time despite segmentation. This is what led the Soviets to believe that their missing body parts still existed, albeit in some unknown place. So one of the leading theories at the time was interdimensionality. Quite mistaken.
When I tell people all the countries I've been to on the Marine Corps, and it's this, and you're well traveled for a slave, wow. Very funny. Countries I've visited, Thailand, yeah, all of these ones. 3 developments in order here. Dubai. This guy goes to Dubai a lot. Yeah, that's fair.
Dubai probably has the highest rate of free-floating non-interface incidents of any major metropolitan area in the world. In one incident, a large group of migrant workers was segmented in an underground facility. Perfect cross-sectional segmentation along the frontal plane. You could see their lungs working, food being digested, blood pumping on the inside of the heart, everything. They lived for almost 5 months in this condition. Absolutely fascinating to see in person. There was also a group of school children who were very slightly segmented, just the ends of fingers and the bits of calves and such. Hardly fatal wounds, yet they all died within 2 months. Some showed signs of intellectual mutation. There are no known flesh interfaces in Dubai. However, it is surmised that the architecture is actually based on interface geometry and carries some latent interface-like power. Mass segmentations remain one of the most mysterious aspects of the interfaces. They seem to show that the interfaces do indeed concentrate on flesh, living up to their name.
So you know how like cartoons will sometimes they'll do like a thing where it's like they'll have jokes for like the adults in them, you know. Yeah, this is an example of them. It's dust for Prince. I found Prince. It's Prince from the famous.
We look at Elizabeth Bathory as an example of pre-LSD enlightenment. In other words, somebody seeming to attempt to build a flesh interface before the invention of LSD. How can this be explained? Perhaps she ingested some ergot or some other naturally occurring psychotropic chemical. Or perhaps her mind was simply attuned to whatever intellectual processes need to occur to invent a flesh interface. The Book of Revelations is also considered to be a description of a flesh interface, especially the description of New Jerusalem. My problem with this is that it's all speculative. It's like when modern psychologists diagnose historical figures. I am uncomfortable with this level of speculation. I will always regard the first instance of a flesh interface to have occurred in Treblinka, 1944. The geologic disturbances, partial tunnels, so-called interdimensionality, and wealth of clearly segmented bodies leave no doubt of its existence. The Soviets have documented this.
Can you explain like I'm 5 this whole comment for me? I'm so lost.
Basically, when you look at the stories of Elizabeth Bathory's behavior, it seems like she's trying to build a flesh interface. But it's known that in order to invent a flesh interface, one must be under the influence of LSD for extended periods. As LSD hadn't been invented during her life, it's probably just a coincidence. Still a tantalizing theory, though.
I see in your posts many mentions of flesh interfaces. Care to define what that is for us? As well as you can using text at least?
Obviously, I can't define a flesh interface in terms of purpose or composition or mechanism. I can only list the various phenomena which are related to them. Chief among these is the creation of an incident zone, wherein objects are spontaneously segmented. In other words, parts of the objects simply disappear, yet the objects continue to behave as if the missing parts are still present. Also, you see complex tunnels created in the earth. These have been termed ant farms. In undersea interfaces, you get chitinous cruciform organisms. These sui generis organisms are thought to be the result of evolutionary processes which took place in an environment other than Earth. This is speculation, but in this case, I agree with it. Then there have been the giant metallic cylinders which appear and experience continuous, spontaneous segmentation. These are usually at least 10 meters in diameter and can get much larger and only occur in very large interfaces, in other words, portals. Beyond this, the phenomena are too various to mention and different for each interface.